Right. Good morning. Happy Friday. If you're watching these at the right times, happy Friday. I've got the very last set of pages in Tuesdays with Morrie. I've gotten a lot of really good feedback on this. I'm hoping you guys are really enjoying it. I'm debating with our last few weeks of class whether to go back into some of the more traditional English stuff that maybe you need for next year, or doing maybe one more book by Mitch Albom. I'm not sure what yet. I'm thinking about leaning towards the book, not because I think it's going to be the most useful as far as uh, technical English skills, although I think it still can be. But I think mainly because I think it's a good thing for us to read right now to have something positive and to give you sort of a different perspective of what you're getting on a day-to-day basis. So, we'll see. If I do go with the traditional stuff, understand it's just because I feel like there's a few things left that we haven't covered that I think we need to probably tackle. But we'll see what happens. I'm not exactly sure what the rest of the year is going to look like. So we'll just see, all right? But let's look at now these last two sections, and you only have one of them. You have the conclusion section that you're going to have read, hopefully, which was only a page. You might have wondered why I waited a whole day, because my book has an afterword for the 20th anniversary of the book that I want to read because it's exceptionally powerful, and you can tell how much the author's changed in this 20 years and how much better he's gotten. Yesterday, Joe Williams sent me a video that had Mitch Albom actually delivering some of the stuff from here and talking about it. And I'm going to include that video with this one today. If you'd like to give it a shot and watch it and just give yourself a face for this guy, learn a little bit more about him. Okay. So, but he does point out in that one, he pointed out something about how, goodness, what was it? About just kind of about the impact the book had. And he talked about when he wrote this, initially it was there to raise money for Morrie's medical bills. He never knew the impact it would have. So let's look at the impact it's had. First of all, we'll read the conclusion. Oh, and I'm going to try my best to keep it together. This is not easy. Even the toughest of us, and I would put myself up there as far as, emotion stuff goes, can crack on this. He said, I look back sometimes at the person I was before I rediscovered my old professor. I want to talk to that person. I want to tell him what to look out for, what mistakes to avoid. I want to tell him to be more open, to ignore the lure of advertised values, to pay attention when your loved ones are speaking as if it were the last time you might hear them. Mostly, I want to tell that person to get on an airplane and visit a gentle old man in West Newton, Massachusetts, sooner rather than later, before that old man gets sick and loses his ability to dance. I know I cannot do this. None of us can undo what we've done or relive a life already recorded. But if Professor Morris Schwartz taught me anything at all, it was this: there is no such thing as too late in life. He was changing until the day he said goodbye. Not long after Morrie's death, I reached my brother in Spain. We had a long talk. I told him I respected his distance and that all I wanted was to be in touch, in the present, not just the past, to hold him in my life as much as he let me. You're my only brother, I said. I don't want to lose you. I love you. I'd never said such a thing to him before. So real quick, this first little part is before we get into the brother stuff. Excuse me, I'm having some allergy stuff this morning. All right, Mitch Albom points out that it's never too late to change. Now, you guys don't struggle with that. You're young. I mean, for you, change is no big deal. I mean, your life is made up of this. Every few years, you have a major change from elementary to middle, middle to high school eventually to college, college to the real world. But for adults, it's a lot tougher. We start to think, well, we get set in our ways, and it's hard for us to change. And that's not the case. Now, I do see some of it in you guys. I see things like, well, I'm just a procrastinator, or I'm just not good at fill in the blank with what other subject, or I'm just a messy person. These are all things that are not who we are. They're just elements of what we've adapted to. All right, you're not good at math because you've told yourself you're not good at math. Now, eventually, if math isn't a gift of yours, you'll hit a point where that is going to be true, but it's not true in geometry. Okay, it's just one of those things that we tell ourselves as an excuse not to change. And he's pointing out that change is part of who we are. So a few days later, I received a message on my fax machine. It was typed in the sprawling, poorly punctuated, all caps letter fashion that always characterized my brother's words. Hi, I've joined the 90s, it began. He wrote a few little stories about what he'd been doing that week and a couple of jokes. At the end, he signed off in this way: I have heartburn and diarrhea at the moment. Life's up. Chat later. Signed, Sore Tush. I laughed until there were tears in my eyes. So, Mitch reaches out, and we do see this kind of closure about him and his brother, that his brother and him are sort of rekindling a relationship. And it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, but he notices that that's actually occurring, and that's kind of a big deal. All right. Since this book was largely Morrie's idea, he called it our final thesis. Like the best of work projects, it brought us closer together. And Morrie was delighted when several publishers expressed interest, even though he died before meeting any of them. The advance money helped pay Morrie's enormous medical bills, and for that we were both grateful. The title, by the way, we came up with one day in Morrie's office. He liked naming things. He had several ideas, but when I said, "How about Tuesdays with Morrie?" he smiled in an almost blushing way, and I knew that was it. After Morrie died, I went through boxes of the old college material, and I discovered a final paper I had written for one of his classes. It was 20 years old now. On the front page were my penciled comments scribbled to Morrie, and beneath them were his comments scribbled back. Mine began, "Dear Coach," his began, "Dear Player." For some reason, each time I read that, I miss him more. So have you ever really had a teacher, one who saw you as a raw but precious thing, a jewel that with wisdom could be polished to a proud shine? If you're lucky enough to find your way to such teachers, you will always find your way back. Sometimes it's only in your head, sometimes it's right alongside their beds. The last class of my old professor's life took place once a week in his home by a window in his study where he could watch a small hibiscus plant shed its pink flowers. The class met on Tuesdays. No books were required. The subject was the meaning of life, and it was taught from experience. The teaching goes on. Now, that's the end of yours. Notice how he echoed the beginning of the book. I've taught you guys about this, and he uses it to a literal degree. I've taught you about bookending. You begin with something and you end with that same thing, and it kind of ties this work together nicely. I don't encourage you to use the exact same words like he did, but those were the right words to end on. And then it draws even more attention to that last sentence. The teaching goes on, which is what he wanted to end this book with, was the idea that just because Morrie's gone, it doesn't mean his words aren't still out there. I mean, this book is a massive hit. I want you guys to understand that it's been around for a long time, but when it first came out, this book just took off. And high schools and colleges all over the world teach this book. I'd like to say this was just a clever idea because I saw the book one day, but it wasn't. I was looking at a list of things and I was like, excuse me. It's like, I love Mitch Albom. I think he's a terrific writer. This is when I had just read his sports stuff. I was like, and I know this book has impact, and I like teaching books that have impact. So let me give it a shot. And the first time I taught it, I didn't know the power that was actually in these pages. Now, you want to talk about power in pages? Let's read the part that most of you do not have, okay? Again, I apologize for all the noises. I'm just fighting allergies, man. All right, this last part is his Afterword, the 20th anniversary edition. And if you're a person like me who studies writing, you know there's a difference. Like, he's improved greatly. It's not like the first half of this is bad, but, you know, you can still tell this is a person who's getting used to their craft. The part we're going to read today is someone who is very well versed in the craft, okay? Let me read this poem that's right here first, because it's going to be something he references, okay? So you have this poem here. It's a, what was it, Thomas Hardy poem, okay? It's actually kind of a cool poem. He says, "I heard a small sad sound and stood a while amongst the tombs around. Wherefore, old friend, said I, are you distressed, now screened from life's unrest? Oh, not at being here, but that our future second death is near, when with the living memory of us numbs and blank oblivion comes." Now, the other thing we're missing from this year is studying any kind of poetry. All right. You know, if my college prep class is watching these, which is kind of my plan eventually, you guys did take a little stab at poetry, but my honors class hasn't yet. And poetry is very intimidating for people. They look at this, they're like, oh, this is so hard to understand. I don't know what we're going to do with this. But that actually is a really pretty easy poem. You got two stanzas. The first one is a guy who's walking around a cemetery talking to the graves and saying, why are all of you so unhappy and distressed? And the second stanza is them returning, they're responding, where they're saying, we're upset because our second death is near. And, you know, that might, and good poems have this little conundrum in there. You're like, second death? You die once. What's this second death they're talking about? Some of you may think, oh, they mean going to hell. You know, no, it's none of that. They're talking about the moment where they're finally forgotten by the living. And that's like a second death, because now they no longer exist literally, you know. That first death is a physical death. The second one is when you disappear. And the sad thing is that you can go right now, maybe you've had a relative die recently, and, you know, you remember being in the cemetery where they were buried. And, you know, you guys may even come back for several years on their birthday or special days and put flowers on their grave. But look around that cemetery at the amount of people who that's no longer the case for them. And it's not that their loved ones don't love them anymore. It's that eventually you become a photograph. And goodness, think about y'all's world where photographs don't even really exist. They're all digital somewhere. I go back through pictures my mom had every once in a while, and I see family members who I know when I was a kid I was around, but I know nothing about them. To me, all they are is those 2 or 3 pictures that she has in a box somewhere, and those are things I rarely see. I see them, once a decade when we're going through stuff. One day that sadly is where we're going to end up unless we do something major. And by major, I don't mean like world shattering. I mean something important that you're remembered for, or something awful. Let's go with the first one, by the way, not something awful. So let's look at this because Morrie's never going to be just a picture in a box at all. All right, so it says, I did go to Morrie's grave. In fact, I've gone many times. At first, it was to keep my promise. Later, it was to keep my connection. Sometimes people wear out on visiting the dead, but I had already lost touch with my old professor once while he was here. I would not do the same thing after he was gone. My most recent visit was just a week before typing these words, which are to be published on the 20th anniversary of this book. It was early fall, a time of returning students in hooded jackets and colorful leaves growing brilliant as they died. Many of those leaves blanketed the wet grass of Newton Cemetery as I walked the familiar route to the small slab that bears his name. As I kneeled down, I noticed the dates on his marker, and I shivered. I was now closer to Morrie's age during our Tuesdays than I was to mine. Now, sentences like that are where we see this guy has advanced as a writer. Instead of saying, I realize now how old I had gotten, he puts it in this very poetic and flowery way. He says, I now know that if we go back to those days 20 years ago, I'm much closer to Morrie's age than I am my own from that time period. So he realizes he's getting older. Hi, Coach, I began, my voice as always self-conscious during the conversation. How's it going up there? Looking back on the pages of this book, I see I shortened the full account of the particular talk where Morrie asked me to visit his grave. When he first brought it up, I told him I'd planned on coming anyhow. He gave a knowing grin. Not the way some people come, he croaked. Don't leave your car running, get out, put down flowers, get back in. Come when you have some time. Bring a blanket. A blanket? Some sandwiches. Sandwiches. And talk to me about life, about your problems. You can tell me who's in the World Series. I laughed and I teased him. Who lays a blanket in the middle of a cemetery, eats a sandwich, and talks to the air? They'll arrest me, I joked. But as I grow older, I think I know why he said that and why it's so important to ensure my attendance the way a good teacher does. Deep inside, it was not dying that truly rattled Morrie. It was being forgotten. Now, if you watch the video I told you that Joe sent me, he actually tells this story in there. And it's really worth watching the video, even though a lot of it is stuff you read, and a lot of it's like word for word what we read. But listening to it delivered by the guy who was there is powerful. And Mitch Albom's an amazing speaker. And he's got a cool accent, and it's just everything about him's awesome. So it's worth watching. So to that end, it turns out he needn't have worried. My old professor is better known after his passing than he was when he was with us. Since the publication of this small book in 1997, which was only written to help Morrie pay his medical bills, grade schools, high schools, and colleges around the world have come to use it in their curriculum, something that would have pleased Morrie immensely. A TV movie and a frequently produced theatrical play keep his wisdom alive on stage and screen. So 1997, the year after I graduated high school. So this book has got a long time on it, definitely. So, but Morrie, I believe, would have most wanted to remain vibrant in the hearts and minds of his family and friends. And 2 decades after his ashes were lowered into the ground, he surely does. But will we? Here's the point of this section. This isn't just like hey, here's all the stuff this book's done. It's really powerful. It's about, are we going to be people that are remembered when we're gone? And some of you may be thinking, well, I don't care if I'm remembered when I'm gone. You should. And not because of vanity, but because you should want to be able to take the gifts and talents that God has given you and put you on this planet with, and to do something with them that would make him proud. And going through day to day and doing nothing with these is not what makes him proud. Okay, I mean, you've read the Parable of the Talents, or had Mr. Morgan or Mr. Grimsley last year, or maybe Coach Sam Pulaski. Someone has talked to you about that before. You've heard it in a church service. If you haven't, let me know. I'll give you a whole speech on it. But the fact is that we should all want to leave enough of an impact that we're remembered fondly, even only if it's just by one person. But we should want that one person to remember us. He says the Thomas Hardy poem that precedes the Afterword is a haunting story about a man who hears voices beneath tombs, voices bemoaning a second death, when memories of the buried soul fade and oblivion awaits. It's something I think a lot about. I remember in writing my book, Have a Little Faith, Rabbi Albert Lewis pondering how long he would be recalled. It seemed a needless concern. He had so many admirers in the community. But he gently pressed me to consider. His children, he said, certainly would remember him. His grandchildren as well. But their children? Perhaps through pictures. And their children's children? Well, ask yourself, can you even spell your great-great-grandparents' names? we have several generations that most of us are remembered. Your children and your grandchildren typically. And after that, you're a name on a family tree, or like I said, a picture in a box. But not everyone is like that. Some people have done something that has made them memorable past those two generations. And that's what we should all want. The truth is, short of making some kind of history, few of us can hope to be remembered in any meaningful way beyond 2 or 3 generations. How then can we hope to live on? How can death end a life but not a relationship, as my old professor often quoted? How is Morrie, not rich, not famous, not a household name while he was alive, managing to do it? I think I know the answer. Okay, so you get, and again, really well written parts. He says that, and then he skips down and gives you the next section. These short little snippets that always have a really good lead in are what he does. He does well. He says, sometimes on Tuesdays, other people would visit my old professor, and they certainly did on days I was not scheduled. Over time, I noticed a pattern. Many who came determined to raise Morrie's spirits spent an hour in his office and exited in tears. But they were not crying about Morrie's sad fate. They were crying about their job, their divorce, their issues. I went in trying to cheer him up, they'd say, but pretty soon he was asking me about my problems, and I was telling him, and he was asking more, and I was really telling him, and then I started crying. I went in to comfort him, but I ended up being comforted by him. Finally, one Tuesday, I confronted Morrie. I don't understand, I said. If ever anyone had finally earned the right to say, let's not talk about your problems, let's talk about my problems, it would be you. You're sick. It's a really tough disease. Why don't you just accept their sympathy? Morrie raised an eyebrow. Mitch, why would I take like that? Taking just makes me feel like I'm dying. Giving makes me feel like I'm living. Giving makes me feel like I'm living. It's a profound sentence. And so true, because the opposite we know is false. Taking never makes you feel alive. It may be the basis of marketing commercialism, Madison Avenue, but we know what Morrie said about not buying the culture. Taking a new car, a new suit, a new flat screen TV, none of it will make you feel alive. It's a temporary thrill, gone quickly when the new smell or warranty wears off. Morrie understood this. It's why many of his possessions could be described as older models. He was invested in something else, giving himself away. At some point during his dying, it became his immortality. Giving is living. So that's why it's so important that you don't skip conclusions afterwards and all the stuff that comes at the end of a book. The final page of the actual book is not always the end. And this is definitely worth reading. It's why I'm taking the time to dedicate a whole day just to this section, because of that message, that this is how we live on. It's by giving to others. And yeah, that doesn't mean they're going to think about you every day, but they will at some point in their lives think back about that. And guys, can I tell you something else? If they don't, it doesn't matter. You have altered that person's life, even in just a minor way. If you've been something as simple as taking 5 minutes to, stop and speak to someone and check on them. And if you can't help them, offer them help. I know you'd love to get home after school on a Friday afternoon. You want to get back and start your weekend. But if you see that freshman who you've seen in the halls and always looks sad, and they're sitting in a corner by themselves, and you just get this push, and by the way, you need to listen to those pushes. That's God speaking to you. You're going to go up and talk to this kid and just say, hey man, everything okay? And yeah, the first couple of times you speak to them, they might be a little bit standoffish. But the fact is that eventually this is how friendships are made. And we all need friends. It doesn't mean this has to become a person you go and hang out with every day, but just the fact that you've spoken, listened to them, you would be amazed how much that can change someone's life, especially in a high school setting where, so many people feel worthless and not valued. And this is a way to just a little small thing like that, which costs you nothing but a little bit of time. The amount of impact that can have long-term on a person. And then, of course, when you get to be an adult, you can have even more impact. Yes, I know you want your Saturdays for your stuff, for watching football or going hunting or fishing or whatever your personal thing is. But, to take the time to go do a service project with your church that's helping a needy family. Little things like that. To you, it's an afternoon. To that person you helped, it is life-altering sometimes. We have that ability just if we can put aside our selfishness for 5 minutes. That's why Morrie kept saying giving is living. And if you've ever done stuff like that, that is when you feel best about yourself. God has designed us to be caring, giving people. He has not designed us to be taking. And our culture, and you guys, I don't understand why there's this huge disconnect. But people will fight when I say this about, our culture telling us that, having a lot of stuff in a big bank account and, being the best possible consumer you can be is your duty. But guys, that is totally anti what the Bible teaches us. You know, we always talk about the world being of the devil, and we are supposed to be separated from that and be different from that, you know, not being of the world. And yet you spend day after day adopting or adapting yourself to that very way of thinking, to the point of where it becomes so ingrained in your personality that if someone challenges it, you want to get mad at them. Can't tell you how many times I've made the comment about pick a job you love where you can give back to others. I said, and if you, even if you don't, if you feel like your calling is to be a lawyer and you become a criminal defense lawyer and you spend your time, you know, sadly getting bad guys out of jail sometimes, if that's what you do, then fine. If you feel like that's what God's called you to do, we need those people too. But with those massive amounts of resources you've had, give back. Find ways you can help. Just don't write a check for the church. Do that too, but then find ways to share of your time. And when people start talking about, oh, sharing resources, what are you talking about? Communism, socialism? Not even a little. I'm talking about being a good person, and that's it. And I'm telling you that that's what we're designed for. And there's a lot of areas where we can argue about what the Bible teaches us, but about giving back to others is not one where you have, if you want to disagree with me on that, you don't have a leg to stand on, because it's very clear that that's what we should be doing. So Morrie figured that out. And, you know, this book is a way of teaching that. And I hope that you guys will process this. I hope that as you start making big decisions in your life, you think about this. Like I said, it doesn't mean the world needs lawyers, the world needs doctors, the world needs businessmen. These are not jobs that are only for sinners. Okay. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that use your resources and your blessings in a way that you can share it with others. You know, my family doesn't, we're getting better. You know, my wife's job pays very, very well, to be honest with you. And we've had opportunities to use that money to help others. Yes, we could have put it into paying off our debts quicker, but you know, Christmas comes around and my wife has a lot of people she works with who don't do as well as she does. And I remember this past year, we struggled in December because we gave away a ton of our money to help out several people she works with. And I never once felt bad about that, and neither did she. And I'm not telling you guys that story so that you'll see, oh, Mr. Morse is a nice guy. I want you to know that I'm not just saying this. We live this in my house. We got our stimulus money the other day. Right now, my wife and I are both working. That money's going in savings. And when we clear this, and if we both, you know, that there's no interruptions in money where we need that money's going to somebody else, because that money is there to help others. It's not so that I can buy something. I'm not going to buy into that part of the world. I did when I was younger. I don't now. You know, I've told people before, if I had a little raggedy apartment up above, you know, a restaurant or something somewhere, and that's how I live the rest of my life, and I barely can make the ends meet, but I managed to do it each month, I would be totally happy with that, as happy as I would be if I had a huge house. It's one of the things that I'm very thankful for. Now, I've gotten off a tangent. Let me read the rest of this because there's more. It says, and that I can say 20 years after its publication is the biggest message of this book. A question I am often asked by readers. Sure, the other loving thoughts and aphorisms are essential to Morrie's teachings. And at any given moment in life, you might find them coming to mind and shedding light. I know I do. But giving as living is more than something Morrie said. It was his philosophy, his raison d'etre. I may have mispronounced that. My French is non-existent. Maybe even his secret. At least it was a secret from me until the time when his lessons finally took hold, like dye that slowly permeates the fabric. After his death, as a result of his urging, I got more involved in my community, in charity, working with the poor and underprivileged. Eventually, this brought me to Haiti, operating an orphanage, visiting it every month. And that brought me almost exactly 20 years from my first Tuesday with Morrie to a little girl who at age 5 suddenly developed a cancerous brain tumor. And once more, someone I cared about and visited regularly had been given a death sentence. Only this time I was the old one and she was the young one, and there was no one else to step in. And so I brought her to America to live with us. It was the beginning in Morrie's finest tradition of something I never suspected, my becoming a teacher. Sorry. Suddenly, the lessons he'd imparted on our Tuesdays together needed repeating, not just to my inner soul, but to another human being, a small and precious child. Janine and I were determined to give her as rich a life as time and medicine would allow and teach her all that truly matters. In the year and a half that she has been with us, sleeping on a small mattress at the foot of our bed, giving to her has become my obsession, the largest consumption of my time. And I have never felt so alive. Says this is what I spoke to Morrie about during my most recent visit to his grave. All I am learning. Giving is living. Coach, you were so right. Now, I will tell you, last year we did some research. This girl did pass away. I mean, I think that Mitch Albom's written a book about this recently. I'm not sure about that, but I think I saw the book and I kind of saw the title and read the back. I was like, I think that's what this is about. But I mean, he poured so much into this little girl, and they knew she wasn't going to live, and she did. She's passed away since. By the way, when I talked about his writing getting better, this is one of the ways you know a good writer. Their ending is not the last, when he's actually into the book, the teaching goes on was a great ending. It didn't have the impact that this does, though. All right, this is better. He has learned how to say, this is the emotion I want people to feel, and to craft it. Not just have them feel it for a momentary, the teaching goes on, you shut the book, you're like, that was a good book. He's done this in a way that I have read this 9 or 10 times, and I still don't make it through without getting a little choked up. I know what's coming, I know what it says, and that is the power of words. That is the power that words hold. All right, last page. So think about him saying, I'm going to be the healthiest old man you ever saw. I used to say that too, but now I know you can't bank on such things. Your blood, genetics, DNA, and future accidents are all beyond the reach of your declarations at age 5 or at age 78. What is within reach is what Morrie said all along. One day, one glance at the bird on your shoulder, one question, is today the day I die? And one good response on the day the bird says yes. That is how I know this guy has become just a tremendous writer. That paragraph. It's not just using the techniques I've taught you about how you bring in former examples and stories and kind of connect them in a way. And he uses the right transitioning, and he uses the right words. And he does all the stuff right. But emotionally, that is so powerful. He says, all we can do is look at one day and keep asking, is this the day? Is this the day? Is this the day? He says, and then this is the key. He says, it's having the right response on the day the answer is yes. Wow. I mean, that is some of the most powerful writing there is, to be honest with you. He says, this is the response that you spent your days giving of your time, of your heart, of yourself. That's how you live on for a day or through others' generations. Morrie Schwartz never read a word of Tuesdays with Morrie, yet he still reaches so many people. Why? Because he took time in his dying days to give to a wayward student, and I wanted to give something back, and wrote this book. See, I told you. And someone gave it to someone who gave it to someone, and now look how large his classroom has grown. For a man who is no longer here to teach it. I mean, like I said, I've read this 50 times, probably. I said 7 or 8. Guys, I've read this. The very first time I read this, I read it all in one day because you just couldn't put it down. And it's still, and it's still just every time gets to you. All right, last paragraph. I visit his grave. You, upon reading these pages, visit his home. And we are connected, not as waves, but as part of the ocean. See again how he used that link back to that other detail. Every detail has to be planned, and it has to have purpose. Through a short, silver-haired man who, in touching us, lives on. I can think of no better legacy for my old professor. I hope wherever he's dancing now, it makes him smile. And then you get the dancing again, too. I mean, Mitch Albom has taken all of the details he laid out at the beginning of the book, and he's sprinkled them into the end, and it feels finished, and it feels powerful. And it's a book that you can read, 2 years from now, pick it back up, and still have the same emotional responses. That's what makes it strong. If you think back to Fahrenheit 451, Faber tells Montag that what makes books have power is the way they touch on life and the way they bring out emotions. And that's what this does. It makes us read it, and you can read it now, and you can pick it up a month from now and have the same emotions, and pick it up 6 years from now and have the same emotions, or pick it up a decade later and still have the same emotions, because that's what good writing does. It's not like I know what happens, it's not going to impact me. I honestly thought I'd be able to get through that without getting a little choked up. The ending gets me because it points out the value in what, I've chosen as a career. I've told Mitzi that there's 3 or 4 kids who I've taught in the last 15 years who I stay in touch with consistently, and they're from varying ages. Some are from the very first few years, some are from the middle, and some are from recent. And it's probably more than that. It's probably about 6 or 7 now that I start thinking about it. But I still stay in touch with them, and they still send me, and it's not me that instigates this. They'll usually send me messages and check in on me. And they do this, fairly regularly. And I know that for whatever bumbling moron I can be in a classroom, something I said or did or presented to them impacted them in a way that they've stayed in touch. And I've told her, if the rest of my teaching career is a dud, if I flame out, if I end up, quitting and end up, becoming so sick with the various things I can't teach anymore, I'll know that I've had an impact. And really, that's what's helped me become okay with the concept of death, is that I know I've done something. Now, do I have what this guy had? Not even a fraction, but that's okay. I don't have to. If one person is made better because of your life on this planet, then you've done what you were here for. And if you can impact more than that, it's just icing on the cake. But if you pass away and all you've got is a big bank account and a lot of cool stuff, but there's no sense of this person impacted my life in a positive way, then it all's a waste. It all goes for naught. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I love this book. It's one of my favorites because, again, it's something I need to read on a year-to-year basis. I teach it because I want to expose you guys to it, but I teach it because it helps me reground myself and realize, hey, things get tough, but there's a purpose in it, and you can't be a negative person. I tend towards negativity, and I've tried the last few years to fight it, and this book is one of the ways I've done it. So I hope it's been helpful for you. I hope you read it. I hope you've watched these videos. And guys, as we move into the next section, whether it's another one of his books or we go into something a little more traditional, I hope that you can approach everything with a different attitude now. A lot of kids do after reading this. Don't lose that. Don't let it fade away. Don't let it become a temporary thing. Let it become part of you, and let it alter who you are and how you see the world. Okay? Guys, I love you all. I hope you have a great weekend, and I will see you next week with next week's going to be an easy week for us, okay? It's going to be I'm going to shoot a paper to you. We're going to work on that. It won't be due at the end of the week, don't worry. And we're going to work on a test for this book, and that's it. We're not going to have anything new yet. I want you to work really hard on the test, and I want you to really start thinking about this paper. I'll tell you more about that in an upcoming assignment, okay? But just know that next week I've kind of got you guys covered. It'll be a little bit of a break, okay? So anyway, you guys have a great weekend, and thank you again for your time.